She was hired to care for the billionaire's mother, but ended up healing his broken heart. Before we start, tell us in the comments, what city are you watching from? And don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 at the end. What happens when a woman with nothing but kindness in her heart walks into a mansion filled with everything money can buy, except warmth? When 28-year-old Lily Harrison accepted a job as a live-in caregiver, she had no idea she was about to step into a world where silence echoed louder than words, where a son had forgotten how to smile, and where a dying woman's final wish would change 3 lives forever. This is the story of how love found its way through locked doors, past frozen hearts, and into the spaces we guard most carefully. Stay until the end, because what happens in the last 30 days will leave you breathless. The iron gates opened with a mechanical hum that seemed to swallow the sound of Lily's old Honda as she drove through. She'd seen pictures of the Westfield estate online, but nothing prepared her for the reality. The mansion rose before her like something from another era, all stone and glass and sharp angles, surrounded by manicured gardens that looked like they'd never known a weed. It was beautiful in the way a museum was beautiful, perfect, untouchable, and somehow lonely. Lily parked her car in the circular driveway, suddenly aware of the rust spots on her hood and the crack in her windshield. She grabbed her 2 suitcases from the trunk, everything she owned fit into 2 suitcases, and walked toward the massive front door. Before she could knock, it swung open. The woman standing there was in her 60s, with steel-gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, and eyes that assessed Lily in approximately 3 seconds. "You're the new caregiver," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am. Lily Harrison." I'm Helen, the house manager. You're late." Lily glanced at her phone. She was actually 5 minutes early, but she'd learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting. "I apologize. It won't happen again." Something flickered in Helen's expression. Maybe approval. Maybe just acknowledgement. "Mrs. Westfield is upstairs. She's had a difficult morning." The previous caregiver left rather abruptly, so she's been without proper care for 3 days. I trust that won't be an issue. Of course not. That's what I'm here for. Helen led her through the foyer, where a chandelier the size of Lily's entire childhood bedroom hung from the ceiling, and up a sweeping staircase that could have accommodated 10 people walking side by side. The walls were lined with portraits, ancestors, Lily assumed, all looking stern and important. She didn't see a single photograph that looked recent, nothing that spoke of the people who actually lived here now. They walked down a long hallway, past closed doors that Lily assumed led to bedrooms, until Helen stopped in front of one at the very end. "This is Mrs. Westfield's room. Yours is directly across the hall. You'll find everything you need: linens, toiletries, uniforms. There's a schedule posted in your room. Breakfast is at 7, lunch at noon, dinner at 6. Mrs. Westfield takes her medications at 8 a.m., 2 p.m., and 8 p.m. The list is by her bedside, along with detailed instructions from her doctors." "And Mr. Westfield?" Lily asked. Helen's face hardened imperceptibly. "Mr. Westfield keeps to himself. He works from his office on the 3rd floor. You won't see him much, and when you do, it's best not to engage unless necessary. He values his privacy." Before Lily could ask what that meant, Helen opened the door to Mrs. Westfield's room. The space was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the gardens. But what struck Lily most was the woman in the bed. Catherine Westfield was thin, so thin that she seemed to barely make an impression on the mattress. Her hair, once blonde, Lily guessed, was now white and wispy, spread across the pillow like silk threads. But her eyes, when they opened and fixed on Lily, were bright and sharp and impossibly blue. "So," Catherine said, her voice weak but clear, "you're the new girl." Lily stepped forward, leaving her suitcases by the door. "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Lily Harrison. It's nice to meet you. Catherine studied her for a long moment. You're young. I'm 28. I've been doing this for 6 years. And you're not wearing scrubs. Lily glanced down at her simple jeans and sweater. I can change if you prefer. I just thought, no. Catherine's lips curved into the smallest smile. I'm tired of looking at medical uniforms. You look like a real person. That's refreshing. She paused, catching her breath. Even that small speech had cost her. Helen, you can go. I want to talk to Lily alone. Helen hesitated, clearly unaccustomed to being dismissed, but she nodded and left, closing the door behind her with a soft click. Catherine gestured weakly toward a chair beside the bed. Sit down. Tell me about yourself, and please, don't give me the rehearsed version you told the agency. I want to know who you actually are. Lily sat, surprised by the request. Most of her clients wanted efficiency, professionalism, distance. They didn't want to know her story. What would you like to know? Why do you do this? Take care of dying strangers. The bluntness was startling, but Lily found herself appreciating it. My grandmother, she said simply. She raised me after my parents died. When she got sick, I was 16. The caregivers who came, some were wonderful. Some treated her like a task to complete. I saw what a difference it made, having someone who actually cared. So when I graduated high school, I got certified. I've been doing it ever since. Your grandmother, she passed 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Catherine nodded slowly. And you never wanted to do something else? Something less heavy? Lily smiled. My friends ask me that all the time. But this doesn't feel heavy to me. It feels important. Everyone deserves to be comfortable and cared for, especially at the end. And there are good moments too. Lots of them, actually. Moments that matter. You're either very wise or very naive, Catherine said, but her eyes were soft. I haven't decided which yet. Maybe a bit of both, Lily admitted. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Catherine said, I should warn you about my son. Mr. Westfield? James. Catherine's expression grew complicated, love and pain and something like resignation. He's not cruel, but he's difficult, cold, people say. He wasn't always like this. But after his father died 5 years ago, and after his divorce 2 years later, he just shut down. Built walls so high I don't think even he knows how to climb over them anymore. Helen mentioned he keeps to himself. He does. He'll barely acknowledge you exist. Don't take it personally. He's forgotten how to connect with people. Catherine's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I worry about him. What will happen when I'm gone? He'll be completely alone in this big house, with nothing but his work and his silence. Lily reached out and gently took Catherine's hand. It was so fragile, like holding a bird. Then we'll have to make sure the time you have left is filled with as much love and laughter as possible, and maybe some of that will rub off on him. Catherine squeezed her hand with surprising strength. You really are young, she said, but she was smiling. Young and hopeful. I think I'm going to like having you here, Lily Harrison. The rest of that first day passed in a blur of routines. Lily unpacked her belongings in her room, which was 3 times the size of her old apartment and decorated in soft creams and blues. She studied Catherine's medication schedule, reviewed the notes from the doctors, and familiarized herself with the equipment, the oxygen tank, the monitors, the emergency protocols. But mostly, she just sat with Catherine, talking about everything and nothing. Catherine told her about the garden in spring, about the tree she'd planted when James was born, about the books she'd loved and the places she'd traveled before the cancer. It was almost dinner time when Lily heard footsteps in the hallway, heavy, measured footsteps that stopped just outside Catherine's door. The door opened without a knock, and James Westfield walked in. Lily had seen his photo in the business magazines at the agency. Westfield Industries CEO closes major acquisition. Tech mogul disrupts healthcare sector. But the pictures hadn't prepared her for the reality of him. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with dark hair that was slightly too long and dark eyes that held absolutely no warmth. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Lily made in 6 months, but he'd loosened his tie and undone the top button of his shirt, as if he couldn't quite stand the constraint of formal clothing. He looked at his mother first, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Catherine said. "We have a new caregiver. This is Lily." James's eyes moved to Lily for the first time, and she felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. His gaze was assessing, clinical, completely devoid of curiosity or welcome. "Miss Harrison," he said, his voice deep and flat. "I trust Helen showed you everything you need." Lily stood, suddenly aware of how casual she looked compared to his sharp formality. "Yes, sir. Everything's been very clear." "Good. My mother's care is the priority. If you need anything, medical equipment, medications, adjustments to the schedule, tell Helen and she'll arrange it. I'm not to be disturbed unless it's an emergency." "Is that understood?" It wasn't rude, exactly, but it was cold, dismissive, as if Lily was just another piece of equipment he'd purchased to solve a problem. "Understood," Lily said evenly. "James," Catherine said, and there was a note of reproach in her voice. "You could at least—" "I have a call in 10 minutes, James interrupted, his tone not changing. "I just wanted to check on you." He leaned down and kissed his mother's forehead, a gesture so tender it was startling coming from someone so icy. Then he straightened and walked out without another word, closing the door behind him. Catherine sighed. "I told you." "It's fine," Lily said, sitting back down. "I've worked with families who prefer to keep their distance. Some people process grief differently." "He's been processing for 5 years," Catherine said sadly. "At some point, it becomes less about grief and more about choice. He's chosen to be alone." Lily didn't respond to that. Instead, she said, "Tell me about the tree you planted. What kind is it?" Catherine's face brightened, and just like that, they moved on. But Lily couldn't quite forget the look in James Westfield's eyes. Not cold, she realized now. Empty. Like someone had scooped out everything that made him human and left just the shell. That night, lying in her unfamiliar bed in her unfamiliar room, Lily thought about what Catherine had said. About her son being alone in this big house. And she thought about her grandmother's words, spoken in her final days. "The hardest thing about dying isn't leaving the world, sweetheart. It's leaving the people you love and worrying they won't be okay without you." Lily understood now what Catherine's real fear was, and she made a silent promise to a dying woman she'd just met. She would take care of Catherine. Yes. But maybe, just maybe, she could help a frozen man remember what warmth felt like, even if he didn't want to be helped. The first week at the Westfield estate established a rhythm that felt almost timeless. Lily woke at 6, did her yoga routine in her room, then went to check on Catherine. They'd have breakfast together, usually something light that Catherine could manage, and then Lily would help her bathe and dress. Some days were better than others. On good days, Catherine wanted to sit by the window and watch the birds. On bad days, she barely had the strength to lift her head from the pillow. James kept his word about staying invisible. Lily would sometimes hear his footsteps overhead, pacing in his third-floor office, or catch a glimpse of him leaving for work in the early morning, always in a dark suit, always alone. He came to see Catherine once a day, usually around dinner time, and the visits followed the same script. He'd ask how she was feeling. She'd say she was fine, He'd stay for exactly 10 minutes, then leave. There was love there. Lily could see it in the way his shoulders relaxed slightly when he entered his mother's room, in the gentleness of his goodbye kiss, but it was love wrapped in layers of ice. Catherine noticed Lily watching. "Ah, you're trying to figure him out," she said one afternoon as Lily helped her sip water through a straw. "I'm just curious," Lily admitted. "You said he wasn't always like this." Catherine's eyes grew distant. "No. When he was young, James was vibrant, full of energy and ideas. He laughed all the time. He wanted to save the world, or at least improve it. That's why he went into healthcare technology. He genuinely wanted to help people." She paused, gathering strength. Then his father had a heart attack. Sudden, massive, unsurvivable. James was 32. He'd just taken over the company. And Gregory, my husband, he'd been James's hero, his best friend. Losing him broke something in James. And then the divorce. Catherine's expression hardened. Vanessa. She married him for the money and the status. When James started working 20-hour days after Gregory died, when he stopped attending charity galas and society parties because he was too buried in grief, she got bored. She had an affair with his business partner. James found out when he came home early to surprise her on their anniversary. She shook her head. He didn't fight the divorce, just gave her whatever she wanted to make it end quickly. That's when the last light went out in him. Lily felt a pang of sympathy despite herself. That's a lot of loss in a short time. It is. But at some point, grief becomes a choice. Lily. He's chosen to stay in it, to keep everyone at a distance so he can never be hurt again. Catherine looked at her intently. I'm dying. I know I am. The doctors gave me 6 months, maybe less, and my greatest regret won't be leaving this world. It'll be leaving him alone in his... He has friends, surely. He has business associates, employees, people who want things from him, but friends, people who know him, know. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. I keep hoping that before I go, I'll see him smile again. Really smile. Just once. Lily squeezed her hand, but didn't make any promises she couldn't keep. Some people didn't want to be saved. Some people preferred their isolation. But then, on day 9, something shifted. Lily was in the garden that afternoon. Catherine was napping, and Helen had shooed her out of the house. You can't care for someone else if you don't care for yourself, Helen had said, surprisingly gentle. Go outside. Get some sun. So Lily wandered through the grounds, marveling at the autumn colors, until she found a section of the garden that looked different from the rest. While the other areas were meticulously maintained, this spot was wild, overgrown, almost forgotten. In the center stood a tree. The tree, Lily realized, the one Catherine had planted when James was born. It was a Japanese maple, its leaves a brilliant crimson, but the area around it was choked with weeds. Without thinking, Lily knelt and started pulling them up. She'd always found gardening meditative, a way to quiet her mind. She worked steadily, clearing the space around the tree's trunk, pulling up the invasive vines that had started to climb its lower branches. What are you doing? Lily jumped at the voice. James stood 10 feet away, still in his suit but with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up. She had no idea how long he'd been watching. I'm sorry, she said quickly, standing and brushing dirt from her knees. I didn't mean to. I know this probably isn't part of my job, but your mother told me about this tree and I saw it was overgrown and I just thought, you thought you'd fix it, James finished, his voice unreadable. I can stop. I'm sorry, I should have asked. No. He stepped closer, looking at the tree and the cleared space around it. Something flickered across his face, too quick for Lily to read. No one's touched this area in years. I told the gardeners to leave it alone. Why? The question slipped out before Lily could stop it. James's eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something other than emptiness in them. She saw pain. Because, he said slowly, maintaining it felt like admitting that time was passing, that things were changing. If I left it alone, if I just let it be, then maybe… He trailed off, shaking his head. That's stupid. It's not stupid, Lily said softly. Grief makes us do strange things, makes us try to hold on to moments that are already gone. James stared at her for a long moment. You sound like you know something about that. My grandmother. I couldn't throw away her favorite coffee mug for 2 years after she died. It just sat in my cabinet, collecting dust, because getting rid of it felt like losing her all over again. What changed? I realized she wouldn't want me to keep a dirty mug as a memorial. She'd want me to remember the mornings we spent drinking coffee together and laughing. So I finally washed it, and now I use it every day. And it doesn't make me sad anymore. It makes me grateful. James looked back at the tree. My father planted this with my mother the day I was born. He used to say it would outlive all of us, that someday my children would play under it. His voice was flat, factual, but Lily heard the ache underneath. I don't think about it anymore. The someday. Lily wanted to say something profound, something that would crack through his defenses. But sometimes the most powerful response was silence, so she just waited. After a long moment, James said, "Finish clearing it, if you want. My mother would like that." He turned to walk away, but Lily called after him. "Mr. Westfield?" He stopped, but didn't turn around. "She talks about you constantly. About how proud she is of you. About how much she loves you. I thought you should know that." His shoulders tensed, and for a moment, Lily thought she'd overstepped. But then he said, very quietly, "Thank you," and walked back toward the house. Lily returned to her weeding, but something had changed. A door that had been sealed shut had opened. Just a crack. This is just the beginning of Lily and James's story, and what happens next will challenge everything they thought they knew about love, loss, and second chances. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. After the garden incident, James's evening visits to Catherine's room began to last slightly longer. Not much, maybe 15 minutes instead of 10, but Lily noticed. She also noticed that sometimes he'd ask Lily questions. Small things, professional things. How was his mother's appetite? Was she sleeping well? Had the pain been manageable? But occasionally, the questions were different. "What did you two talk about today?" he asked one evening, a week and a half into Lily's time there. "She told me about her honeymoon in Positano," Lily said. "How your father surprised her with a boat trip, and she got terribly seasick but laughed the whole time." Something softened in James's expression. "She's never told me that story." "She has thousands of them," Lily said. "If you have time someday, you should ask her to share more." He looked at her. Then, really looked at her, and Lily saw confusion in his eyes. As if he couldn't quite understand why this stranger cared so much about his relationship with his mother. "I have a meeting," he said finally, and left. But the next night, he stayed for half an hour, and he asked Catherine about Italy. And Catherine's face lit up in a way Lily hadn't seen before. The following week brought the first real crisis. Lily woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of Catherine coughing, deep, rattling coughs that shook her whole frail body. She rushed across the hall to find Catherine struggling to breathe, her lips tinged blue. Lily immediately adjusted the oxygen, checked Catherine's vitals, and administered the emergency medication the doctor had prescribed for situations like this. But even as she worked with practiced efficiency, her heart pounded. Catherine's oxygen levels were dangerously low. Should I call an ambulance? Helen appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Not yet. Let's see if the medication helps. Lily kept her voice calm even though she was terrified. She held Catherine's hand, monitoring her breathing, watching the numbers on the machine. You're okay, Catherine. Just breathe with me. Slow and steady. It took 20 minutes, 20 of the longest minutes of Lily's life. But finally Catherine's breathing eased. The blue tinge faded from her lips. Her oxygen levels crept back up to acceptable. There you go, Lily said softly, brushing Catherine's hair back from her sweaty forehead. You're okay. Catherine managed a weak smile. You're good at this. I've had practice. It was only as the crisis passed that Lily realized someone else was in the room. James stood in the doorway, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, the most casual she'd ever seen him, his hair disheveled from sleep. His face was absolutely white. Is she? His voice broke. She's stable, Lily said quickly. It was a bad episode, but the medication worked. Her vitals are improving. James moved to the bed, taking his mother's other hand. Mom? I'm fine, darling, Catherine said, though she clearly wasn't. Just gave everyone a scare. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. James's voice was rough. He looked at Lily. What happened? Lily explained, the coughing, the oxygen levels, the protocol she'd followed. As she talked, she watched James's face. The mask of indifference was gone. In its place was raw, undisguised fear. Is this going to happen again? He asked. Lily hesitated, then decided he deserved the truth. Probably. The cancer is progressing. Her lungs are weakening. But I'm here, and I know what to do. I won't let anything happen to her that I can prevent. James held his mother's hand for another hour, even after she fell back asleep. He just sat there, watching her breathe, as if he could will her to keep doing it through sheer force of attention. Lily stayed too, monitoring the machines, adjusting Catherine's pillows, maintaining her professional distance even though she wanted to put a hand on James's shoulder and tell him it was okay to be scared. Finally, as dawn started to lighten the sky, James spoke. Thank you. His voice was barely a whisper. For knowing what to do, for being here. It's my job, Lily said gently. No. He looked at her, and his eyes were red-rimmed. Your job is to administer medication and follow protocols. What you did, staying calm, comforting her, making her feel safe, that's more than a job. That's a gift. Lily didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. James stood slowly, as if his bones ached, and left the room without another word. But something fundamental had shifted between them. After that night, James started appearing more often, not just in the evening, but randomly throughout the day. He'd come down from his office during his lunch break and eat with Catherine in her room. He'd work at the small desk by the window while Catherine napped, as if he couldn't bear to be far away from her. And he started talking to Lily, really talking, not just asking clinical questions. How did you stay so calm? He asked her one afternoon while Catherine slept. They were both in her room, Lily working on a needlepoint project in one chair while James reviewed documents in another. The other night, you must have been terrified. I was, Lily admitted, looking up from her needlepoint, absolutely terrified. But panicking wouldn't have helped her, so I couldn't let myself go there. How do you do that? Control it. Lily thought about it. My grandmother used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. When I'm in a situation like that, I focus completely on the task. I let my training take over. The fear doesn't go away, but it becomes background noise. James was quiet for a moment. I don't think I could do what you do. Watch people die and then move on to the next one. I don't think of it as moving on, Lily said carefully. Every person I care for leaves something with me. A story, a lesson, a moment of connection. They change me. And I hope, in some small way, I make their last days better than they would have been without me. You do, James said, and there was something in his voice that made Lily look up. He was staring at his sleeping mother. You've made a difference here. For her. For. He paused. For both of us. Before Lily could respond, Catherine stirred and woke up. The moment passed, but Lily tucked it away in her heart. A small breakthrough. The weeks began to blur together. October became November. The trees in the garden went from brilliant color to bare branches. Catherine had good days and bad days, but the trajectory was unmistakably downward. She slept more, ate less. The pain medication doses increased, but she was still herself, still sharp and funny and full of stories. And James was transforming before Lily's eyes. He started joining them for breakfast sometimes. He'd read to his mother from her favorite books. He brought her flowers from the garden. Nothing fancy, just wildflowers he'd picked himself, which Catherine treasured more than any expensive bouquet. He even, once, laughed at something Catherine said. It was a rusty, unpracticed sound, as if he'd forgotten how. But it was genuine. Lily watched this unfold with a mixture of joy and heartbreak. Joy because Catherine was getting what she'd hoped for, these precious last days of connection with her son. Heartbreak because Lily knew how it would end. And because, somewhere along the way, she'd started to care about James Westfield in a way that had nothing to do with professional duty. It started small. She'd find herself looking forward to his lunch visits, listening for his footsteps. She'd notice things about him. How he took his coffee black, how he ran his hand through his hair when he was stressed, how his whole face changed when he smiled. She told herself it was natural. She was human. He was an attractive man who was learning to be vulnerable again. Of course she'd notice. But then came the day she realized it was more than noticing. It was mid-November, a cold Tuesday afternoon. Catherine had been having a particularly difficult day, restless and uncomfortable despite all of Lily's efforts. James had cancelled his afternoon meetings to stay with her. He sat at her bedside, holding her hand, talking to her about the company, about a new project he was excited about, just keeping up a steady stream of gentle conversation to distract her from her discomfort. Lily was across the room, preparing Catherine's evening medications, when she heard Catherine say, "James, darling, I need you to promise me something." "Anything, Mom. When I'm gone, don't shut down again. Don't go back to that lonely office and cut yourself off from the world." James's voice was thick. "Mom, promise me you'll keep living. Not just existing, living." There was a long silence. Then James said, "I promise." Lily glanced over and saw tears streaming down his face, the first time she'd seen him cry. Her own eyes filled in response, and she had to turn away. But what she felt wasn't just sympathy. It was something deeper, more personal. It was the desire to go to him, to hold him, to tell him he didn't have to do this alone. That's when she knew. She was falling in love with him. The realization was terrifying. This couldn't happen. She was here for Catherine, not to develop feelings for her client's son. Besides, James was grieving, vulnerable. Even if he felt something back, which was unlikely, it wouldn't be real. It would just be him clinging to the one person who was helping him through his mother's death. So, Lily did what she'd learned to do. She pushed the feelings down. She maintained her professional boundaries. She reminded herself that in a few months, this job would end, and she'd move on to the next one, and James Westfield would be just a memory. But late at night, lying in her bed, she couldn't stop thinking about him, about the man he'd been, and the man he was becoming, about the way his rare smiles made her heart skip, about how much she wanted to know what it would feel like to be held by someone who was learning how to feel again. It was impossible. It was inappropriate. It was pointless. But it was also undeniably true. Thanksgiving arrived with unseasonably warm weather and a house that felt both too big and too small. Catherine was having a good week, one of her last, though no one wanted to say that out loud. She'd requested a proper Thanksgiving dinner, or at least her version of one. She couldn't eat much, but she wanted James and Lily and Helen and the rest of the staff who'd been with the family for years to gather together. "I'm tired of everyone eating in different rooms," she said firmly. "We're going to have a family dinner. Even if I can only have soup, I want to sit at the table with all of you." So they set up the formal dining room, and Helen cooked a feast, and for the first time since Lily had arrived, the mansion felt like a home. Catherine, dressed in a soft blue sweater that hung on her thin frame, sat at the head of the table with James on one side and Lily on the other. The staff joined them: Helen, the groundskeeper named Thomas, the part-time housekeeper Maria. They ate and talked and laughed, and for a few hours it was possible to forget that this was a farewell. Lily watched James throughout the meal. He was more animated than she'd ever seen him, telling stories about disastrous childhood Thanksgivings, making his mother laugh until she had to catch her breath. He'd rolled up his sleeves and loosened his tie, and there was color in his cheeks and light in his eyes. He looked alive. At one point, Catherine said, "This reminds me of when you were little, James, before everything got so serious, when you still believed in joy." James reached over and took her hand. "I'm remembering how," he said quietly. Then his eyes flicked to Lily. "I'm learning again." The look he gave her lasted only a second, but it was loaded with meaning. Lily's breath caught. She told herself she was imagining it, but then Catherine squeezed her hand under the table and gave her a knowing smile, and Lily realized she wasn't imagining anything. After dinner, James helped his mother back to her room while Lily cleaned up with Helen. The older woman was unusually talkative, chatting about previous Thanksgivings, about how good it was to see Mr. Westfield smiling again. "You've done something miraculous here," Helen said as they worked. "I didn't think it was possible." "I haven't done anything," Lily protested. "Catherine's the one who—" "Don't be modest. You've brought life back into this house, not just for Mrs. Westfield." "For him too," Helen paused, giving Lily a pointed look. "And I think you know that." Lily felt her face heat. "I'm just doing my job." "Are you?" Helen's voice was gentle, not accusatory. "Because the way you look at him, and the way he looks at you, that's not professional." "Nothing has happened," Lily said quickly, "and nothing will. I would never. I know. You're too honorable for that." Helen sighed. "But Mrs. Westfield is dying, Lily. We all know it. Another month, maybe 2 at most. And when she's gone, you won't be his employee anymore. You'll just be 2 people who've been through something profound together. I'm just saying, don't let fear stop you from something that could be beautiful." Before Lily could respond, James appeared in the doorway. "Lily, my mother wants to talk to you." Lily excused herself and went upstairs, where she found Catherine propped up in bed, looking tired but content. "Sit," Catherine said, patting the bed beside her. Lily sat, and Catherine took her hand. "That was a perfect day," Catherine said softly. "Thank you for making it happen. You're the one who insisted on it. But you made it feel right. You always do." Catherine's blue eyes studied Lily's face. "You care about him." It wasn't a question, but Lily felt her pulse quicken anyway. "Of course I care. He's your son, and he's—" "Lily." Catherine's voice was firm despite its weakness. "I'm dying. not blind. And I didn't raise a fool. You love him." The words hung in the air between them. Lily wanted to deny it, to maintain the professional distance she'd been clinging to. But she couldn't lie to this woman. Not now. Not about this. "I do," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to." "Why are you apologizing?" Catherine looked genuinely confused. "Do you think I'm upset?" "It's inappropriate. I'm here to take care of you, not to develop feelings for—" "Lily," Catherine squeezed her hand.
You've given me the greatest gift anyone could. You've helped my son remember how to be human again. You've brought warmth back into his life. Why on earth would I be upset about that?" "Because it can't go anywhere. When you—" Lily's voice broke. "When you're no longer here, this job ends. I'll leave. And even if I didn't, James isn't looking for a relationship."
"He's just grieving, and I'm here, and you're the most genuine, kind, beautiful person who's walked into his life in years," Catherine interrupted. "And he's falling for you too, whether he realizes it yet or not. I see the way he watches you when you're not looking, the way his whole face changes when you enter a room." Lily shook her head. "Even if that were true, it wouldn't be real. It would just be the circumstances." Heightened emotions. When things go back to normal, he'd see that. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "When I was young, about your age, I met a man at a hospital. My father was dying of a stroke, and this man, Gregory, was there because his sister was having a baby. We were in the cafeteria at 3 in the morning, both of us exhausted and scared and drinking terrible coffee. And he made me laugh. Right there in the middle of the worst week of my life, this stranger made me laugh. We talked for an hour. He gave me his number. I threw it away because I thought, how could anything that starts in a hospital be real? It's just circumstantial, just two people in crisis." "But you married him," Lily said softly. "I did. Because 2 weeks later, I ran into him at a bookstore, completely by chance." And my heart did the same flip it had done in that cafeteria, and I realized that it didn't matter where or how we met. What mattered was how I felt. So I took a risk. I asked him to coffee, and he said yes, and we had 43 beautiful years together before his heart gave out. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Don't make the same mistake I almost made, Lily. Don't throw away something real because you're afraid of the circumstances." "But what if I'm wrong? What if it's just, then you'll find out. But at least you'll know. You'll have tried." Catherine's grip tightened with surprising strength. "I'm not going to be here much longer, Lily. I can feel it. I'm tired, and I'm ready, but I need to know that James won't be alone. And I don't just mean physically. I mean truly alone. I need to know that he'll have someone who sees him, who cares about him, who can help him keep being the man he's becoming instead of the ghost he was. Catherine, promise me you'll give it a chance, that you won't run away when this is over, that you'll at least tell him how you feel." Lily's throat was so tight she could barely speak. "I promise," she whispered. Catherine smiled, relaxing back into her pillows. "Good. Now go get some rest. Today was wonderful, but I'm exhausted, and I imagine you are too." Lily stood, but before she could leave, Catherine said, "Lily, he's worth it. The risk, the fear, all of it. He's worth it." Lily nodded, not trusting her voice, and left the room. But as she crossed the hall to her own bedroom, she nearly collided with James, who was standing in the shadows of the hallway. I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I was just—" He paused, and even in the dim light, Lily could see the conflict on his face. "Did you mean what you said? To my mother?" Lily's heart stopped. "How much did you hear?" "Enough." He stepped closer, and Lily could smell his cologne, could see the rapid pulse in his throat. You promised her you'd tell me how you feel. So I'm asking, how do you feel, Lily? This was it. The moment where she could retreat into professionalism, could deflect and deny and protect herself. Or she could keep her promise to a dying woman and risk everything. I feel... Lily took a shaky breath. I feel like I've spent the last 2 months trying not to fall in love with you, and failing. Completely. I feel like every time you walk into a room, I forget how to breathe. I feel like watching you transform from this closed-off, frozen person into someone who laughs and cries and feels again has been the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed. And I feel terrified because this is impossible and inappropriate, and I'm probably going to lose my job for saying any of this. But your mother made me promise. So, James kissed her. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate and fierce and full of months of unspoken longing. His hands cupped her face like she was something precious, and Lily's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. The kiss tasted like wine from dinner and felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that for weeks, he said roughly, but I told myself I couldn't. That it wouldn't be fair to you, that I was just clinging to you because you were helping my mother, that it was all just circumstances and grief and heightened emotions, Lily finished. Yes. But then, tonight, watching you laugh with my mother, seeing you fit so perfectly into this family, I realized something. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. This isn't circumstances. This isn't just me being grateful or grieving.
This is me falling completely in love with a woman who walked into my life and reminded me what it feels like to be alive. Lily felt tears spill down her cheeks. James, I know this is complicated. I know you're technically my employee, and my mother is dying, and the timing is terrible. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel this. I can't keep acting like you're just the caregiver when you're so much more than that.
His voice broke. You're everything. They stood in the hallway, holding each other, and Lily felt like her heart might burst. This was real. This was happening. This impossible, inappropriate, perfect thing was actually real. What do we do now? She whispered. James was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Now we take care of my mother. We give her the best last days we possibly can. And we do it together. And then, when it's over, we figure out what comes next. But I need you to know, Lily, whatever happens, I'm not letting you go. Not unless you want to go. I don't want to go, Lily said. I don't want to go anywhere. They kissed again, softer this time, full of promise and possibility. And when they finally separated, when James went to his room and Lily went to hers, everything had changed. Catherine, lying in her bed across the hall with her eyes closed and a smile on her face, whispered into the darkness, "Thank you." She wasn't sure who she was thanking, God, fate, the universe, but it didn't matter. Her son had found love again. Her son was going to be okay. She could let go now. The week after Thanksgiving brought a cold snap that turned the estate's gardens into a winter wonderland. It also brought a noticeable decline in Catherine. She slept more than she was awake. Her appetite disappeared almost entirely. The pain medication increased to levels that left her groggy and confused. The doctors adjusted her care plan, adding stronger medications, preparing everyone for what was coming. James took a leave of absence from work. He moved his laptop to Catherine's room and worked from there, just so he could be near her. Lily maintained her professional duties, but now James was her partner in it. They worked together seamlessly. She'd start to reach for medication and he'd already have it ready. He'd noticed Catherine needed repositioning and Lily would be there helping him before he could ask. They communicated in glances and small touches and shared understanding. Late at night, after Catherine fell asleep, they'd sit together in the sitting room that connected Catherine's bedroom to the hallway. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just held hands in silence. Once, James fell asleep with his head on Lily's shoulder, and she stayed perfectly still for 2 hours, just so he could rest. These moments were precious and stolen, and bittersweet. "Tell me about your grandmother," James said one night. They were curled up together on the small sofa, Lily tucked into his side, both of them exhausted, but unwilling to leave Catherine alone. "Her name was Ruth," Lily said softly. "She was tough and funny, and didn't take any nonsense from anyone. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 6. She was in her 60s, but she learned how to do everything: parent-teacher conferences, soccer practice, teenage drama. She did it all. That's where you learned to be so strong. She used to say that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about how you put yourself back together afterward." Lily smiled at the memory. "When she got sick, she made me promise I'd keep living after she was gone, that I wouldn't let grief make me small. I think about that promise every day." James was quiet for a moment. "Is that why you do this? Care for the dying?" "Partly, but also because I saw how much it mattered. The caregivers who treated her with dignity and kindness versus the ones who just saw her as a task. I wanted to be the person who made a difference, who made the hard days a little easier." "You do," James said, kissing the top of her head. "You make everything easier." One morning in early December, Lily woke to find Catherine unusually alert. It was one of those strange rally periods that sometimes happened near the end, where the dying person suddenly seemed almost healthy again. Catherine wanted to get out of bed, wanted to sit in the chair by the window, wanted to really look at the winter garden. "Today is a good day," she announced with more energy than she'd had in weeks. "I want to make the most of it." So they did. James carried his mother to the chair and wrapped her in warm blankets. Lily made her favorite tea. They opened the windows despite the cold, so Catherine could feel the winter air on her face. And they talked, really talked, about everything and nothing. Catherine told stories about James as a child, embarrassing ones that made him groan and Lily laugh. She talked about her own childhood, about her parents, about the dreams she'd had when she was young. She asked Lily about her plans, about her hopes for the future. "I want to keep doing this," Lily said, "caregiving. But maybe someday I'd like to teach too. Train other caregivers. Help them understand that it's not just about medical care. It's about humanity." "You'd be wonderful at that," Catherine said. Then she looked at James. "And what about you, darling? What do you want for your future?" James glanced at Lily, and something warm and certain passed between them. "I want to remember how to live," he said. "Really live, not just work and exist. I want to travel, to try new things, to laugh more. I want—" He reached for Lily's hand. "I want to not be alone anymore." Catherine's smile was radiant. "Good. That's very good." She closed her eyes for a moment, looking peaceful. "I'm so tired, but I'm not afraid anymore. I got to see you both find each other. I got to see you happy again, James. That's all I wanted." "Mom." James's voice was thick. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm ready." She opened her eyes and looked at them both. "Promise me one more thing, both of you." "Anything," Lily said. "Promise me you'll be happy. That you'll take care of each other. That you won't let fear or doubt or anyone else's opinion stop you from having the life you deserve." "We promise," James and Lily said together. Catherine nodded, satisfied. "Then I can rest easy." That night, Catherine slipped into a deeper sleep. The doctors had warned them. This was the beginning of the end. She might have days, but more likely hours. Her breathing became more labored, more irregular. The hospice nurse came and went, checking vitals, adjusting medication, preparing them. James never left his mother's side. He held her hand and talked to her, sharing memories, telling her he loved her, thanking her for everything she'd given him. Lily stayed too, supporting James, monitoring Catherine's comfort, making sure she wasn't in pain. Helen and the other staff members came to say goodbye. Thomas, the gruff old groundskeeper, broke down crying and had to leave. Maria held Catherine's other hand and whispered prayers in Spanish. Even the hospice nurse, who'd seen hundreds of deaths, wiped her eyes. She was special, the nurse told Lily quietly. You can tell by how many people love her. As evening turned to night, Catherine's breathing changed. It became shallower, with longer pauses between breaths. James was on one side of the bed, Lily on the other, both holding her hands. The room was lit only by a soft lamp, casting gentle shadows. I'm here, Mom, James said, his voice breaking. I'm right here. You're not alone. You'll never be alone. Catherine's eyes fluttered open one last time. She looked at James, then at Lily, and smiled. Her lips moved, forming words they couldn't quite hear, but the message was clear in her eyes. Thank you. I love you. Be happy. And then, with her son holding one hand and the woman who'd become like a daughter holding the other, Catherine Westfield took one final breath and was still. The silence that followed was profound, not empty, but full of love and grief and the weight of a life well lived. James bent over his mother, his shoulders shaking with sobs, and Lily came around the bed to hold him, to let him break, to be his strength the way he'd need her to be. They stayed like that for a long time. The hospice nurse came in eventually, gentle and respectful, to officially pronounce the time of death. Helen made phone calls. The funeral home was contacted. But through it all, James and Lily stayed with Catherine, unwilling to leave her just yet. She's really gone, James finally said, his voice raw. Yes, Lily said softly, but she was so loved, and she knew it. That's what matters. I don't know how to do this, James admitted. How to exist in a world without her in it. Lily cupped his face in her hands, making him look at her. One breath at a time. One moment at a time. And you don't have to do it alone. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. James pulled her close, burying his face in her neck. Promise. I promise. The funeral was held on a grey December morning. The small chapel was packed with people whose lives Catherine had touched. Friends, former colleagues, members of her book club, people from the charities she'd supported. James stood at the front and delivered a eulogy that was both heartbreaking and beautiful, talking about his mother's warmth, her humor, her unconditional love. She taught me that strength isn't about building walls, he said, his voice steady despite the tears on his face. It's about having the courage to let people in. And in her final months, she reminded me of that lesson when I'd forgotten it. She brought someone into our home who changed everything. His eyes found Lily in the front row. She gave me one last gift, the chance to love again. The words caused a ripple through the crowd. People turned to look at Lily, and she felt her face heat. But she didn't look away from James. She held his gaze and let him see everything she felt. After the service, as people gathered at the estate for the reception, Lily tried to stay in the background. She was, after all, just the caregiver. She didn't belong at a family gathering. But Helen found her in the kitchen, where she was helping arrange food. "What are you doing back here?" Helen asked. "I'm not family. I shouldn't." Lily Harrison, you are more family than half the people out there who haven't seen Mrs.
Westfield in 5 years. Now get out there and stand beside that man who needs you. So Lily went. She found James surrounded by well-wishers, looking overwhelmed and exhausted. When he saw her, his whole face changed. He excused himself from the conversation and came to her, taking her hand without hesitation. "I can't do this without you," he said quietly. "You're doing fine." "I'm really not." He squeezed her hand. "Stay with me."
"Please." So Lily stayed. She stood beside James and accepted condolences from strangers. She met his extended family, aunts and uncles and cousins who eyed her with curiosity. She fielded questions about her role in Catherine's care and tried to ignore the whispers she could hear about how quickly James had moved on. One woman, an aunt on Catherine's side, cornered Lily in the hallway. "So you're the caregiver," she said, her tone frosty. "How convenient that you caught James's eye while you were being paid to be in his home." Lily felt the words like a slap, but before she could respond, James appeared at her side. "Aunt Patricia," he said, his voice cold, "I'd appreciate it if you didn't insult the woman I love. Lily made my mother's last months bearable. She brought joy and comfort to someone who was dying. And yes, I fell in love with her in the process. If you have a problem with that, you're welcome to leave." Patricia looked shocked, then offended, but she walked away without another word. Lily stared at James. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. I'm not hiding how I feel about you, Lily. Not from anyone, not ever." He took both her hands. "I know this is fast. I know people will talk. I know it looks strange, but I don't care. Life is too short to waste time worrying about what people think." "Your mother said almost exactly that," Lily said, tears filling her eyes. Then she was right. As usual. James pulled her into a hug, right there in the hallway with people walking past. "I love you, Lily. I'm saying it now because I should have said it weeks ago. I love you." "I love you too," Lily whispered against his chest. The days after the funeral were strange. The estate felt different without Catherine in it, emptier, quieter. James went back to work, but only part-time. He was different too, softer, more present. He'd call Lily in the middle of the day just to hear her voice. He'd come home early to have dinner with her. They'd spend evenings in the sitting room, just talking or reading together. But there was an elephant in the room. Lily's job was over. Catherine was gone. There was no reason for Lily to stay at the estate anymore. She should start looking for her next position, should move on to another family that needed her. She mentioned this to James one evening about a week after the funeral. They were in the library, a fire crackling in the fireplace, both pretending to read books they weren't actually absorbing. "I should probably start looking for another position," Lily said, trying to keep her voice casual. "I called the agency today. They have several families who need—" "Don't." James set down his book and turned to her. "Don't take another job. James, I have to work. I have bills, student loans. Move in with me. Really move in. Not as an employee, as—" He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "As my partner. My girlfriend. Whatever you want to call it." Lily's heart raced. "Are you serious?" "Completely. I know it's fast. I know people will say it's too soon. But I've already lost too much time being afraid and closed off. I don't want to waste another second." He moved to sit beside her on the couch, taking her hands. "I love you, Lily. I want you here. Not in the guest room, not as an employee, but with me. Really with me. I want to wake up next to you. I want to have breakfast with you. I want to come home to you at the end of the day. Say yes. What about my career? I'm a caregiver, James. It's not just a job, it's who I am. I know, and I'm not asking you to give that up. James reached into his pocket and pulled out a folder. I've been thinking about this. What if you started your own training program for caregivers? You could teach them everything you know, the medical skills, yes, but also the human part, the compassion and dignity and connection that you do so naturally. I could help you fund it. We could set up a foundation in my mother's name. Lily stared at him, overwhelmed. You've thought about all this. I've thought about nothing else. My mother told me once, in those last weeks, that you wanted to teach someday. So teach. Help other people become the kind of caregiver you are, and do it from here, with me, while we build a life together. James? Lily felt tears streaming down her face. That's the most incredible thing anyone has ever offered me. Is that a yes? Lily laughed through her tears. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. James kissed her then, deep and passionate and full of promise. When they broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. Thank you, for taking the job, for caring for my mother, for teaching me how to feel again, for loving me even when I was a frozen disaster of a human being. You were never a disaster, Lily said, just hurt and learning to heal. We both were, James said, but we're better now. Together. 6 months later, on a warm June evening, Lily stood in the garden beneath the Japanese maple tree. It was in full bloom now, its delicate leaves a vibrant green. The area around it had been completely transformed, cleared of weeds, planted with flowers, turned into a memorial garden for Catherine. A small bench sat nearby with a plaque that read, Catherine Westfield, beloved mother, friend, and teacher of love. Lily heard footsteps behind her and turned to see James walking across the lawn. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, and he was smiling, that real, genuine smile that still made her heart skip. How was the first class? He asked, pulling her into his arms. Incredible, Lily said, her face glowing. 12 students, all so eager to learn. We talked about the medical basics, but also about presence, about really seeing the people we care for, about humanity. James finished, kissing her forehead, just like my mother wanted. The Catherine Westfield Foundation for Compassionate Care had launched 2 months ago. They'd converted one wing of the estate into a training center, where Lily taught monthly intensive courses for aspiring caregivers. The students came from all over the country, drawn by the curriculum that combined medical expertise with emotional intelligence. Lily had also started a scholarship program, ensuring that people from all economic backgrounds could access the training. It was everything she dreamed of, and more. I got a letter today, James said, from the family of one of our scholarship recipients. Their mother is dying of ALS, and they hired the caregiver we trained. They said she's been transformative, that she's made their mother's final weeks bearable. His voice was thick with emotion. My mum would have loved knowing that we're doing this in her name. She does know, Lily said softly. I feel her sometimes, especially in that training room, like she's proud of us. James held her tighter. I'm proud of us, of what we've built, of how we turned something painful into something meaningful. They stood like that for a while, wrapped in each other's arms beneath the tree that had witnessed so much of their story. Then James pulled back slightly, his expression shifting to something more serious. Lily, there's something I need to ask you. Okay. James reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Lily's breath caught. He dropped to one knee right there in the garden, in the spot where they'd first really talked all those months ago. Lily Harrison, he said, opening the box to reveal a simple, stunning diamond ring. You walked into my life when I was barely existing. You taught me how to feel again, how to love again, how to live again. You cared for my mother with such grace and dignity that it changed me fundamentally. And then you stayed. You built a life with me. You turned your compassion into a legacy that will help thousands of people." His voice broke. "I don't want to spend another day without knowing you'll be by my side forever. Will you marry me?" Lily was crying too hard to speak at first. She nodded frantically, then managed to choke out, "Yes, yes, of course, yes." James stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her deeply. When they broke apart, both laughing and crying, a breeze rustled through the maple tree's leaves, and Lily could have sworn she heard Catherine's voice carried on the wind. About time. That evening, they celebrated with Helen and Thomas and the rest of the staff who'd become family. They called friends, made plans, toasted to the future. But later, when everyone had gone and the house was quiet, James and Lily returned to the garden. They sat on Catherine's bench, Lily's head on James's shoulder, and looked up at the stars. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Lily asked. "If I hadn't taken this job. If your mother hadn't made us promise to give us a chance." "All the time," James admitted. "I think about the man I was before you came. How closed off I was. How lonely. How I was just going through the motions of living without really being alive." He turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "You saved me, Lily. Not from grief. Grief is natural and necessary. But from drowning in it. From letting it consume everything I was. You saved me too," Lily said. "I'd spent years caring for others, but never letting anyone care for me. I was so focused on being strong and professional that I forgot what it felt like to be vulnerable, to need someone." She smiled. "Your mother saw that. She saw both of us locked in our own ways, and she pushed us together." "She always was a meddler," James said fondly. Then he grew serious. "I wish she could be here for the wedding." "She will be," Lily said with certainty. "She'll be in every promise we make, every vow we take, every moment of joy we share. She's woven into our story, James. She always will be." James kissed her temple. "I love you. I love you too." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other in the midst of loss and learned that love could bloom even in the darkest times. That sometimes the most beautiful things came from the most painful circumstances. That healing wasn't about forgetting the past, but about honoring it while building something new. The Japanese maple rustled again in the evening breeze, its leaves whispering secrets to the night. And if you listened carefully, you might have heard the sound of a woman's laughter, joyful and free, blessing the couple beneath her tree. Because Catherine Westfield had gotten her final wish. Her son was happy. Her son was loved. Her son was no longer alone. And in a mansion that had once been silent and cold, there was now warmth and laughter and light. There was love. Simple, profound, transformative love that had started with a job posting and ended with forever. Some people might say it was too fast, too convenient, too much like a fairy tale. But James and Lily knew the truth. Real love didn't follow timelines or rules or other people's expectations. Real love was messy and complicated and brave. It was showing up even when it was hard. It was being vulnerable even when it was scary. It was choosing each other, again and again, despite the fear and the doubt and the pain. And it was worth every single moment. 5 years later, James and Lily stood in the same garden, but now they weren't alone. A small girl with dark hair and bright blue eyes, Catherine's eyes, ran through the flower beds, chasing butterflies and laughing with pure, uninhibited joy. "She would have loved this," James said, watching his daughter play. "She does love it," Lily corrected gently, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "She's watching." James pulled his pregnant wife close and kissed her. Around them, the garden bloomed with life. The foundation they'd built was thriving, training hundreds of caregivers every year. The house that had once been a museum of silence was now filled with laughter and toys and all the beautiful chaos of family. And in the center of it all stood the Japanese maple tree, growing stronger every year, its roots deep and its branches reaching toward the sky, a living testament to the woman who'd brought them all together and the love that had bloomed beneath its leaves. This was the life Catherine had dreamed of for her son, the happiness she'd fought for, the legacy she'd left behind, and it was perfect. Thank you for watching. Now tell us in the comments, what rating would you give this story from 0 to 10? And what lesson from Lily and James's journey touched your heart the most? Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about love, loss, and the beautiful ways our lives intersect. See you in the next one.